Hey guys, welcome back to Set the Standard with your host, Janelle and...
Dad.
That's so annoying. Oh my gosh. You're in a mood today,
Well, you
aren't
have to separate the difference in the hosts here.
Mm-hmm. I think they get the difference.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think they
I wasn't sure if they
Yeah.
did, so I was pause for effect.
It's really hard to tell us apart. That's for sure. I'm sure.
Well, I've been meaning to tell you this. I might as well go public with it. You're adopted. I
Dad.
found you in a lake,
This
floating
would be the most
floating down a river.
Really? Was I a wild flamingo girl?
You're just floating down a river, and I go, "Oh, look at that little booger!" Plucked you out of the lake, brought you home, threw you in the bathtub.
Wow.
Next thing you know, what a pain in the...
All
Let's
right.
back to welcome
Yeah.
to the standard.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, we're gonna have more of a discussion topic today, which I'm kind of amped up about because I have some questions from my dad, and hopefully, as he's sitting here, he can ask me some back because that's what he's got to work on when it
Yes.
comes to this podcast.
That's right. That we took your feedback. You gave us that feedback. They did.
Yes. Okay. So our topic today, I'm just going to get right into it here, is going to be about when do you give someone a second chance? Do you ever give someone a second chance? And if so, kind of maybe think about your limits. We're going to be talking about ours and how forgiveness is different than giving someone a second chance. I've recently learned that forgiveness is completely separate from giving, someone another shot, because you can forgive someone.
Forgive and forget.
We'll forgive and move on,
Yeah, okay.
right?
Yep.
I think a lot of the times when I thought about forgiveness, it was, oh, you forgive and you give you give another chance. And if you don't give another chance, you don't forgive, you just move on. That's what I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
I think you recently helped me learn that, but we're going to get into it. This is going to kind of be like more discussion based, and maybe you agree with us, maybe you don't. I feel like sometimes these get a little bit more kind of fun to get you guys in the comments or just to see what you guys have to say on like Instagram and stuff like that. So I'm basically going to start with my dad. And Dad, I want to ask you a question just to start off this discussion.
Okay.
Have you ever give someone a second chance? And if you have, did you regret all of them? Or is there one that you have where you're like, wow, I'm glad I gave that person a second chance?
Yeah, it was you, and yeah, I totally regret it. But it kind of makes my point, right? When you have children, we frame this up. I think we were talking earlier between family, or in this case, children, your significant other, other family members, friends, boyfriend, girlfriend. Those types of things do fall into different categories. In other words, I wouldn't blanket say, no one gets a second chance in my life, right? Because a child is a lot different than a friend, in my opinion.
You think you've given your child second chances?
Hundreds of chances, actually.
Well, is that even a chance, or did you sign up to have a child so you're supposed to just give that?
Well, part of that, you could frame that as...
Wait, that's actually, you have given me a second chance before.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you could say with a child, and we don't have to get bogged down in this because I want to give you the floor here, but a child, kind of what we were talking about earlier about you tell a child not to do something.
Yeah.
Right? And they go and do it anyway. And then you correct them.
Mm-hmm.
You're essentially giving them a second chance. You know what I
Yes.
mean? If again, we're going to get into the egregiousness of this quote, the felony, if you will, or a misdemeanor that the person did on you in order to get the second chance.
Mm-hmm.
But in the case of a child, you're, literally that's what raising a child is. It's all about second chances.
Mm-hmm.
As you get older and you say things like, well, I'd say to you, don't get in a car with anyone drinking and driving, because unfortunately it's not about me giving you a second chance. You could lose your life.
That was always your thing.
That was more of a, God forbid something terrible would happen. So go ahead.
It's funny. I didn't even think about that. So when I just asked my dad the question, is there anyone besides children you've given a second chance to and you're like, wow, I'm really glad I gave them a second chance?
Yeah, I think my, in some ways, siblings,
Well,
know?
you don't even have to give examples. The
Yeah,
answer
no,
is,
well,
have you
yes.
given a second chance and been like, I'm glad I did?
Yeah,
Really?
sure. Mm-hmm.
See, I don't know if I've given anyone a second chance and was glad I did.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Oh, you have?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are they still in your life?
No. Because it was the third. What's the saying?
Fool me
once.
shame on me.
yeah.
Here, together now.
Fool me once. No.
Oh,
Fool me
once.
once.
Shame on you.
Fool me twice. Shame on me. So those sayings came as a result of people who said, okay, the person came to them. I'm so sorry. I never do it again. And you go, okay, all right. Maybe you don't talk to them for a little while or whatever.
Yeah.
Then you let them back into your life. Now I've, clearly in my span of living, I've been,
which is 85,000
decades.
years.
I've been around for decades. But in all seriousness, it is. You're probably more forgiving, naive
When you're younger.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And then when you get older, you probably tolerate less.
Well, it's a hardened heart. Yeah.
No, I think it's wise. You get wiser in terms of.
Right. You can see the red flags better.
I think so.
Yeah.
And again, I think it depends on what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say someone stole money from. I'll give you one. I'll give you an example. You loan somebody money.
Okay. Family member or a friend or just.
Let's just use for now. They say, hey, can I borrow $500?
Okay.
And, I need to get my car fixed or whatever. Here's $500. I plan on paying you back. Let's say they even go to the extent of saying,
giving you a date.
I'm going to pay you back this much over this course, the whole 9 years. I mean, so they're showing you that they're very, very committed to this idea of paying you back.
Okay.
And so you loan them the money and then they never pay you back. And so I heard a saying once before. It said, don't ever loan money to someone with the intention of getting paid back. And I remember hearing that a long time ago. And I thought, that's not, why would you do that? Well, he's a guy in Shark Tank, bald guy, Mr. Wonderful. He said that he's very wealthy.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
and he's
very, a shark.
Yeah, he's a very opinionated guy. And he said that, I was listening to a podcast or something he did, and he goes, I've had family that came to me and needed money, whether it was for an investment, business or whatever. And he said, what I would say to him, I'd sit him down and say, I'm going to give you this money, but I will never loan you or give you money again in the future. That's it.
If you don't pay him back.
No, you don't have to pay him back. I'm giving it to you.
Oh.
Remember, he's very wealthy. But his point in that, and again, I'm not saying I agree with all these things, it's just setting. He probably set these parameters after he got burned a bunch. So, he basically got to the point where he was like, I'm just going to tell him, here's a gift. This is a gift for you, but never again. Because the other side of that is you give someone money and they come back, I need a little bit more and I need a little bit more and I need a little bit more. And that goes back to the, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. If, when your kid gets into high school or whatever, college, and they do something, let's say they get a drunk driving or they get caught drinking or something like that, what are you going to do? So you're going to say, hey, let's say the law is not involved.
Okay.
It's just you found out, you talk to them, say, listen, this is what could go wrong. I think if you really have the discussion with the child and say this, again, assuming all they did was got in trouble in some way.
Right.
You say, listen, here's what can happen. These are the potential things that, you were fortunate this didn't happen to you at this point. Let's say the kid got real sick, threw up and, from drinking too much, but then maybe did something at someone's house and got in trouble. So that's where you say to the kid, what are you going to do? You're not going to say to the kid, hey, get out of my life. I'm never going to talk to you again. You're going to say, don't do it again. There'll be consequences. Maybe there were consequences as a result of the first time. So now the kid, a couple months go by and the kid does it again. What do? Do you disown the child at that point? No. So this is why this discussion,
I think we should get more into like love and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, that's wherever you want to go.
Yeah. Because I can't really. I get the kids
relate.
thing, but
right.
I can't. I'm trying I want
to
contribute, but I don't really.
100%. But I'm clarifying that whole idea. You said fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. as a parent.
Right. It gets,
Right.
I mean,
But
yeah,
now
it's a
let's
little
talk
different.
about friends,
Right.
boyfriend, girlfriend,
And like
all that.
because obviously your viewpoint on your kids is the fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. That's going to be, I don't know if I've experienced
Fair.
that.
Yep. Fair enough. You understand it.
Besides-
It's just being fair.
You're right. But I will say with a parent, I've experienced it maybe a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But to not go that way, maybe more with those who watch, deal with more of love relationships and friendships, have you ever just done the fool me once, shame on me, or shame on you? So have you ever gotten to the point where it was
Yes.
fool me once, shame on you, and you were done?
Yeah.
You have?
Yeah. Later in life, I think
Okay.
do
you feel like it was the right decision?
yes.
Okay.
I don't want to be, so the only caveat I'd make here, I don't want to come across like, I'm somehow better than someone else or anything like that.
Because you've given second.
So how I would frame this is this way. I have a set of standards that I live by as a person, hence the show that we call Set the Standard. So if I believe in integrity, honesty, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone asks me a question and, I'm not going to lie to them. I'm going to tell them whatever it is they're asking me. If someone needs me to help them, I'm going to help them if I can.
Okay.
Within reason. That doesn't always mean financially in any way. If I'm going to hold myself to that, I'm going to hold someone in my life to that as well. I'm not saying I always did that. I'm saying later in life I did.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone comes into my life and there's some kind of a friendship, we'll say, I'm not talking now boyfriend, girlfriend stuff because I'm married, so that doesn't matter anyway. But I'm just saying a new person comes into my life and something happens where they break that code or that standard in which I live by. They lie to me. They go gossip about me to someone else or some other baloney like that. I'm out. Like I'm done. It's over. I don't feel at that point, because of the brain damage I have from going through this before, that person, if they've shown that side of themselves in the relationship, it's probably gonna happen again. At least in my experiences.
Yeah, that's good. That's what I was going to ask you. So you've always found if someone has done an action, it'll probably happen again?
Or it's a behavior thing, right? So if someone's just like, whatever, they're, I don't know.
Well,
they're always skating around.
So when I was living in the condo that my dad got, I threw a party and it was pretty messy, and the cops came, and the cop was like, listen, if you call your parents and you have them show up right now, that this is their place and I can talk to them, like, we'll figure something out. So I had to call my dad. I just knew it was not going to be good, and him and his wife Terry shows up, and it wasn't good for me. But my dad gave me a second chance, and he goes, okay, you can't have anyone at the condo for a set period of time when I feel comfortable enough to re-allow you to have people over.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay. And I was like, thank you so much. I was so scared. It was such a scary experience, because there was like drugs and alcohol and underage kids and blah, blah. Then time went on, and within that time frame that wasn't freed just yet, I had two friends come upstairs and help me pick out this date outfit. And I was like, let's be really quiet because there's someone else in my condo that could tattle on me. So let's keep it quiet. So they come upstairs, and we're obviously being a little bit loud. And all of a sudden my phone rings, and it's like 12:30 in the morning. And it's my dad. And I'm like, oh, I know exactly what this is about. So I answer the phone call, and my dad goes, Janelle. And I was like, yes, Dad. And he's like, do you know why I'm calling you? And I was like, it's because blah, blah, blah. I had two friends are in my room. He's like, yes. So the next day, essentially, my dad was like, you're going to have to pack your stuff. Like, you're going to have to go find your own place and figure that out, because I gave you a second chance after you threw a party. I had some guidelines, and you just went against them. So ultimately, I don't know if I wrote you a letter. I think I made a PowerPoint as to why I should still stay in the condo.
What a salesperson.
Yes. I was going to go into sales. And I was able to stay. And ever since then, I never, and I stayed in the condo for a little while longer. Actually a couple years. I never had another party, and
That you got caught doing.
I hadn't.
I'm kidding.
No. Yeah, I never had another party there, and I never, if there was like guidelines or whatever, I followed them. But it did take that second and then even like the third chance for me to get there. So what do you have to say about like my behavior of that? Yeah.
Yeah. What I would, as you were telling that story, and I don't remember all of it. I remember some of that. Remorse is an interesting thing, in being able to gauge sincerity around someone who's remorseful.
Okay.
Right. So I was thinking about the image of walking into the condo the night that you had the party, and the cops were there and they were acting all their tough stuff, which is a little annoying. But you were standing there and you were clearly, visibly shook up. You knew, because of the way I raised you, you felt bad you disappointed me. You felt like you didn't like the fact you got caught. That bothered you for sure. But the fact that this thing happened the way it did, and that I had to come there at whatever time in the morning it was with Terry and see you, and it was a mess and the whole thing, I think you felt, it appeared, and only you can say for sure, but I knew you felt bad and that you didn't like the fact that you disappointed me. Now, again, you did the little two-friend thing a little while later, and, I honestly, I don't even remember that. I think when it comes to this idea of,
you don't remember me getting in trouble?
Yeah,
when you told me to not have
no,
anyone
I don't
over?
remember that, honestly.
Well, that's why.
Couldn't have been that big of a deal, I guess.
Well, that's why.
I do remember a letter, and I probably have the letter.
Well, that's why, who was living with me at the time, and I stopped getting along. That's why it was severed.
Well, I think the point in this example isn't so much about, kids are kids, and, if you're listening to this, you have kids, you're probably giggling. I mean, I look at the stuff I did, my dad, and put my dad and mom through. I think this is where I would maybe backtrack a little on what I've said, and that is the remorse side of things. And that's sometimes a gut call, because I've seen people who appear to be very sorry and very remorseful, and, I don't want to say they're begging, but close to it. And then you kind of, you're a human, and you just kind of, okay, well, all right. You give in and say, all right, we can get past this. And I've been fooled in that example. So
in the example where someone begged or was remorseful or whatever and showed it, but then clearly didn't follow through, do you regret giving that second chance?
The ego side of me, which, is something I'm always working on. Who wants to get burned? Nobody. I mean, we're all so like, no one's gonna take advantage of me, man.
Well, some people are like, I gave.
No, I mean, I know there's some people who are more gullible, and they're just they want to help and all that.
Yeah, they want to help.
Yeah, I don't want to come across like some hard guy here, but I think if you don't have some kind of standard that you hold yourself to, and usually we have these conversations in past podcasts, you're a product of the 5 people you hang around with, right? You're a piece of them. So if you're hanging around with a bunch of people who are stealing and lying and doing bad things, there's a better chance you're probably going to be doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
If you're hanging around with people who have high integrity, who are upstanding citizens, or doing the right thing, making good choice, if they make a mistake or do something, you can just tell, like, some people how they are courteous about things, or they don't ever ask for, you have these friends every once in a while. Hey, can I borrow your saw? Hey, can I borrow your car? Hey, can I borrow? They're always borrowing stuff, and after a while you kind of go, I mean, I don't mind loaning stuff to people, but I don't want to become like a rent service. Like, I
get it. No, I get what
so
you're
all
coming
these
from.
things come back to, yes, I have regretted. And that's probably what made me a little more hard-lined on it outside of family. I do think about, but I also am trying to have a better spirit about things.
Do you think once a cheater, always a cheater?
Yeah, the data would suggest that. So we were getting into behavioral things, like,
right. Well, that's where it's like, because then forgiveness has to be added in, and then we'll get into why forgiveness is different than second or not giving a chance or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But we are getting to behavioral things. But behaviors can be corrected, or do you think they can't once you're an adult?
Well, no, I think they can. I mean, listen, I can't say that I've had, I mean, we all have issues with little glitches in how we do things. I've never had a, quote, full-blown diagnosed behavioral thing where I had to go to see somebody to get it fixed.
Well, maybe you should.
Yeah, and maybe I should.
Yeah,
That's what my problem is.
Honestly, it's the same.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, I think there's people that you would, who are thieves or liars. Yes, they have probably something going on that would have created that. I'm not a, doctor. I can't diagnose that stuff.
Right.
But I think I think what I was trying to say earlier is that it's like when we talk about trust. You give someone trust initially when you meet them.
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be another discussion or a podcast. So let's just say I meet.
So you give everyone trust?
Well, there's probably there's a guarded trust that I would call it.
Okay.
So, I meet someone new. Hi, we're doing this thing next week. We need some help we need volunteers, and you go there and you help and you get to know the person a little more. Next thing you know, you're playing golf with them, or you go out and, do something, and you just spend some time with them and you see how they are. Next thing you know, you're somewhere and they're like, yeah, look at that, person over there, or yeah, I stole this from my neighbor, or they say something, they give you a window inside of them. That's when you put your ears up and you go, oh, okay, all right. Now that doesn't mean you never talk to them again, but you're definitely very careful, or more careful. Now, my tendency at this age, they're out. I'm done.
With what? When? What?
That if I pick up something like that, if I sniff something out about a person and that I don't particularly.
Well, what if you give trust to a person, a friend, or whatever, and then they do something that so flabbergasts you because you just were like, wow, that person was a really great person.
Well, I thought they were, yes.
Yep.
And if it's not against me, if I observe or hear, like I just gave you that example, let's say they say something like, yeah, man, I was in the store and I was able to walk out with these 3 things. I got them for free. I stole them, basically. Well, I go, okay, this person.
Well, what if back when you were like dating a sweet girl,
okay,
and she comes to you, if you're exclusively getting to know each other, and she was like, oh my gosh, I slept with my ex by accident and I totally regret. I'm so sorry. I needed to tell you, but I want to continue our.
Over.
Really? Why over? Why?
Yeah, well, that's a big one. We probably need to frame up the more egregious ones. That to me would be a deal breaker. Like, hands down, never going to be able to.
Because that's like cheating, right?
Yeah, well, that tells. So I always think about what kind of mind. You have to get in the mind of think about the mind of a person who does something like that. Is there a good excuse to do that? Is there ever a good reason to do that? Ever. Ever. No. So there's never a good reason. Then why would I try to understand a reason? Why would I waste my breath and my brain and you trying to explain to me why you did that? I drank too much. Well, you shouldn't have drank then. Well, whatever it is. It's just like, to me, and at that point, I know how I am. Here's what would be my problem.
Okay.
Even if I thought to myself, all right, I'll give them another try. You know what I would be? They didn't come home. Let's say I call them. They don't answer. I call them an hour later. They don't answer. Call them 2 hours. This is now.
Well,
this is weeks or months later. Or if it's not my wife, we're talking girlfriend, whatever it is. All of a sudden, they're, MIA until the next day. Oh, what? Oh, my phone fell in the river and, I lost it and blah, 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 blah. Man, I just would not be. That's where I'd be. I think my sensors would be so heightened and my lack of trust would be so. I would just have the trust factor goes out the window. I don't think I could. And for their sake, too, by the way, this isn't just about me. I wouldn't want them to have to deal with what a jerk I might become.
Totally.
Knowing that they've just breached, to me, a sacred thing, our relationship.
Yeah.
And so I would just be, where you at? How come you're not home yet? what's going on? Where are you at? Who are you with? Da, 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 and so forth. I'd be like, that's not fair to them or me.
No, yeah.
It's so I just be better off going. Now, if they're, there's a lot of other factors in that, like how long were you dating? If it's a marriage, that's really different.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now, what if there was some separation in the marriage? You've experienced a separation before, or what if there's a separation in a marriage or a relationship, and the two you part ways?
Mm-hmm.
And I won't get into time frames and stuff, but they did in fact deal with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what's your idea on that?
Well, in a marriage, when I hear the word separated, there are legal separations in marriages, right? There's, now I haven't done that. So I speak a little bit out of lack of true experience here, but I would imagine that if you were with your significant other and for whatever reason you reached a point in the marriage where it wasn't going well, but you were agreeing to work on it. Mm-hmm. Now that can happen a couple ways. That can happen.
What if you don't? What if you separate?
Well, the reason you separate is because, quote, the whole idea behind a legal separation is you are working on it.
Oh, interesting.
Now you get into some gray areas. So I'll give you another example. You say to the person, I want a divorce. And they say, okay. So in various states, that process takes 6 months.
Oh.
Okay. To be, quote, legally divorced.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's just say you ask for a divorce and a person moves out. Right. So theoretically, you're still married.
Yeah.
However, you're heading towards divorce. Now, during that 6-month period, many people date, do whatever, and so forth. Is that infidelity in the sense of the term? Is that going against that person? And the answer is no, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Besides the spiritual side of things, just from a legal standpoint, you are still legally married. And if you are having sex with a person outside of that marriage, you technically are committing adultery, even though you're going towards divorce.
Right, you both are.
So this is where it gets kind of interesting. Now, I would venture to say that people who are, quote, breaking up, not married, but just say, I'm done with you, you're done with me.
Right.
Let's say that night they call someone,
right,
and they go do the boogie.
I've done that, yep.
They do the boogie woogie, realizing a week, 2, 3 months later, man, that other person was so special and I screwed up and this and that. They call them back up and say, hey, can we work this out? And blah, blah, blah. And maybe they do. That's a tricky thing, because if you could go in so many directions there, is that cheating? Well, if they broke up and said, we're done, and that same day they went out and, did what they did, are they really wrong? Did they go against that person? I think more than hurt feelings, they technically are free.
Because you're right, because a day or 2 weeks, it's still, if you're broken up.
You're broken up.
It's not.
Right.
The timing might be weird only because it's like,
it might be right.
It's just like, did that
Well,
person...
how many people do that and they don't even know? What I mean is, they break up, I'm done with you. I mean, you may know couples. I knew some. Well,
it's funny.
They broke up all the time. They broke up, got back together, broke up, got back together. Well, while they were broke up, they were out doing whatever. I know that's for a fact.
True. Wait. So there's a funny story. So a friend of mine just told me this. And she goes, when I was in college, there was this really cute boy, and she was, partying with him one night, and he's like, I just got out of my relationship like a few days ago. He was dating this girl for a few years. So he's like, yeah, I just got out. They're dancing. They're kind of getting along that night. He's like, by the way, like, I just got out of a relationship, just want to let you know, I'm kind of like not looking for things that are serious. And my friend was like, yeah, no worries, whatever. And they end up sleeping together that night. It was a one-night stand, and she stayed connected with him on social media, whatever. And she just said she never heard from him again, never got his number, whatever. So 6 months down the line, she gets a message from the ex-girlfriend. Hey, me and Jim Bob, we're back together. I just wanted to ask you, girl to girl, did you guys do the thing when we were broken up? Like, did he tell you, whatever? And she goes, girl to girl, she goes, I just replied, and now I don't know, whatever, you guys can choose to do what you want to do or what I would do, but
So
she replied.
Said yes?
Yep.
Ooh.
And goes, yeah, I don't want to leave this in my messages, and I also don't want to lie to you. I don't also want to get in the middle of this, but I will tell you, yeah, it happened. And he did tell me that you guys were broken up. So it's funny, she never knew what kind of happened with that storyline, but she had just kind of recently peeked at, like, I think she still follows him maybe on Instagram or something, but they're married and they just had their first baby.
Oh, so wow.
Isn't that interesting? I know. So isn't that interesting?
Oof.
How,
yeah.
Why do you say oof?
Well, I how many years are we talking now, you think?
That was back, so she was in college.
The last 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, like 8.
Well, here's the problem. There's a lot of flashing lights there for me. Like,
why?
Well, when he goes, I just broke up, I'm not looking, and she's like, well, that's cool. Well, how many guys could use that line who aren't broke up? I mean, they just do that to,
yeah,
well, then reel it in.
That's like some, but they were just freshly out of a relationship. But anyways,
I do so think.
What do you think about the whole breakup? Like, let's say I'm in a relationship and my guy makes me upset. And I'm just like dealing with some of his stuff. Maybe I'm dealing with some BS that he has in his life that I'm just like, maybe he lives with like a guy that I don't like, and maybe he parties too much, maybe he's drinking too much. And I'm like, I'm dumping this guy. This is annoying for me. It wasn't anything crazy, but this behavior's not. So let's say I dump him, and the next night I'm out there dancing with, Sabrina, and I meet a really cute guy, and I'm like, wow, this guy's really cute. He's an actor. And I'm just like, okay, I'm going to take it to the sheets. And then I wake up and I'm like, wow, you know what? This isn't the life I want to live. I'm going to call Joe Schmo, and I'm going to tell him that I feel bad, and if we can work on his differences and mine.
And you're going to tell him what you did?
I'm going to tell him.
Okay.
And I call him and I tell him.
Yep.
And he's upset. And he doesn't know if he should forgive me. Do you think that maybe he should give me a second chance, or?
It's interesting. I my standards would be, I remember saying a long time ago, long before I was married and had a family and all that would never, ever, ever be something I would agree.
Even in a breakup?
Yeah.
Okay.
That I would,
I get the whole cheating thing.
I don't know that I would even, I don't know if I even framed it that way, but all I'm saying is it goes back to, and each situation's different. The remorse side, as we talked earlier, the whole, like you just said, the outcome of that one example you just gave, they got married and had a kid.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's many of those types of stories out there, and I think this is what we're trying to get our audience to think about. I would say that you have to set parameters for your life, whatever those are. And so then when you're faced then with that situation you just described, this idea we were dating and then broke up and this stuff happens. Then you say, how does that fit into what I have set for myself, my standards? Is that something that I feel that I could be able to overcome, as a person?
That decision comes with wisdom and
so,
experience.
Right. And so, as I said, for me, that would not, I couldn't, the way I function as a person, right or wrong, it's who I am, that I couldn't get that out of my head. That would probably drive me crazy. And I would probably have a harder time with that person, that it might come up. It might be something I would always be thinking that. So for me, unfortunately, if for their sake and mine, I think I would probably be out. Okay. Now, once that were to happen, I would spend some time, because I would take some accountability in that, whatever that is.
Right, because you were acting
I would not be, I wouldn't be like, oh, just, I'm so perfect. Why'd they do this to me? I'd be like, okay, why would someone, if they're fulfilled in the relationship, and whether this is a friend or a boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever, husband, wife, what creates in someone's mind the desire to do that, knowing at some level that's going to hurt the other person. Let's be frank here. If someone's going to do something like that, and in this case, sleep with another person, and, quote, they broke up prior to them doing this, they're going to have a conscience around that. Now, if they can do it, let's say the same day they break up and they wake up the next day and they don't feel nothing for that other person, meaning the person they broke up with, then maybe it's time for them to move on. Yeah, boom, go on.
Yeah.
But don't do it and then say, oh, I feel horrible. Now I'm going to go back to the other person. You shouldn't have to go to those extremes to recognize when you have something that is valuable to you. That's what I always come back to. And so in my case, going through a divorce, I recognize that I created some issues in the marriage, right? I recognize that and it wasn't that I committed infidelity, but I, whatever it was, just for that person, there were things there that clearly they were not happy about. So I take responsibility for that. But that's not a reason to go do something that's going to be more destructive to the relationship.
What if they thought the relationship was over?
Well, and then that becomes the gray area where you have to come to those terms. In the case of a marriage, it said when you're, quote, divorced, there's the official date of that, which technically then you are done, right? I mean, so there's no, well, we were only divorced one day and you went out and had sex with someone else. Well, yeah, we were divorced, right? I mean, so now while you're going through divorce is another area. Most people would say, hey, we're going through divorce. I'm not going to wait around. I'm going to go out and have fun. As we think about this topic, it's going to have a lot of factors to take into consideration. Each person out there that's listening to this has probably had some example of this. You go back to your days as a kid and when you're in, elementary school and one of your friends thought was your friends dumps you for another kid in school and doesn't talk to you anymore. And you think how brutal that is, like
and then
you're
when
crushed.
They come back and they're like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And then you have the friend you've had for life, that you met in school and, you're still with. So coming back to making sure that you have your expectations set. And I think when you meet someone and you think it would go without saying, hey, listen, just so you know, if you ever cheat on me, I'll never see you again. I don't think that's something you should have to say. I know you said you went out with people who said, hey, you're one of many. And so they're being upfront about it. It's not like they're saying, you're my one and only. And then they're, having girls coming over on the other days. Yeah.
That was when I wasn't dating like good guys.
No, but my point being is those people.
And by the way, when they said one of many, like I was just going on dinner dates and kissing these people. I was not, but they were just saying, hey, I have like a roster of girls.
Roster. There you go. I like that.
Yeah. And I was just like, okay, I won't be added to it, but we can go to dinner.
But that example was they had decided rather than try to play a shell game of, not answering calls because they think, and all this, and then sneaking around. They just were up front like, hey, I just want you to know. I'm not saying I agree with that behavior.
Totally.
So,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that this is where like forgiveness comes in, whether you have given someone a second chance or a third or a fourth or a fifth, or let's say you just don't give them a second chance and you're easy to just cut that friend off, cut that relationship off, you're done, you're good. I think the key thing here is forgiveness regardless if you're giving them a chance or not. And this is something I recently learned, because if you don't forgive, that's only going to be hurting you because you're holding on to that. That's going to bog you down. When you forgive someone, you let them go with that decision that hurt you, that choice, that lifestyle. And you say, that's where they're at. And that's them. And that's gonna be okay because I know that I'm gonna be okay moving on over here without that negativity. And you release that. And I think forgiveness is more of like a release of the action that hurt you.
Well, yeah, you don't want to take space up in your mind. I think you just said something made me think, if you've made the decision the person did the behavior you don't agree with, and you've
Right.
made the decision that they're not going to be in your life.
Yes.
Question is it still worth allowing them to come to you and explain things? Is it worth giving them that opportunity to really?
Well, didn't you say something earlier? If it was cheating, does it ever make sense? You said, I don't think I'd ever take the time to understand it.
At this point in my life, because I know that I couldn't.
Back then.
Right.
Got it.
So
You're right. I think.
So
I think if
let's
you're-
assume it's not cheating.
Yeah.
Let's just say someone stole something from you. Okay. And
I don't know if I want to hear them out.
okay. That's kind of what I was
Yeah.
asking.
Like if I found out that one of my brothers stole my nice watch and sold it, like a gold watch, sold it for a couple grand.
Mhm.
You're good. I guess maybe it would be like, why did you think?
There you go. That's where I was going.
Yeah, but honestly, what if he was like, I was so broke? I'd be like, okay, well, why didn't you say something? To me, it would never.
I'm not saying they could justify. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay, yeah, I would
if
hear
they
it.
okay. And the point in that is
Yeah, I would hear it.
back to the remorse thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, hey, I'm so sorry. I was really in a bad spot. This is what, I will make it up to you. I will make sure.
What if you don't want them to?
Well, that would be your choice, is
Right.
assuming you're doing that out of, now, oftentimes, in scenarios, you'd say, okay, here's what I need you to do. I'm going to have you paint my house and work it off,
Yeah.
or do something like this, or, you need to go volunteer at the church and do some things there or whatever. So there are,
Totally. Now, what if it's someone that you loved and they hurt you? Or let's say you split it off and then they went and hurt you. Maybe it wasn't sleeping with someone. Maybe it was just they, just partied hard, and then they came back to you or they did hook up with somebody in some way or went on dates or something.
I think the physical hookup stuff is definitely in its own category.
Okay, the physical hookup stuff. So what if they
Yeah.
come back to you and they're like, I'll make it up to you?
Yeah. So again, my pat answer is no go. It's not negotiable. Every situation in some ways is different. Not that there's ever a good excuse for that. But I think it goes back to, what's at risk here. In the case of a marriage, let's say you're married and you have 3 kids and there's a lot going on there, and something like this happens and you say, okay, I could divorce this person, or we could work to fix it. I told you the story of that one particular person who did cheat and took him back, cheated again, took him back, cheated again, took him back, still together.
And
That's
better than ever, apparently.
Apparently. Now, will we ever really know deep down
No,
inside
it's
what's
not
going
a
on?
relationship.
That's right. But they had to figure whatever they did to arrive at that. In the case, it was one person that
We don't
did
even know. Maybe she's allowing him to do that while they're still married. And she's
There's
like,
we know
what I
in-
don't know
right.
won't kill me.
Well, the open marriage stuff is a whole nother discussion. But all I'm saying is and let's get back and see other questions you might have.
yeah.
But I would say in the area of infidelity, whether it's dating or marriage,
We're broken up.
that's definitely a non-negotiable for me.
Now, last one. What if you were broken up for like 2 years and you hadn't talked to somebody and you come back together?
Then it's
and
fair
you both
game.
Dated,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fair game.
So why is the time?
Well, because listen, people live their lives. I mean, you aren't going to be like, you aren't going to, if you
stay in your house.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but let's say you broke up for whatever reason. Let's say
Yeah.
it was a distance thing.
Yeah.
And someone said, this is just too tough. It's not going to work, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So off they go. And through mutual friends or whatever, there's still you hear, oh, yeah, so-and-so's doing this and they're doing that and this and that. But then again, the next thing you know, 2 years, you come together at some event and you recognize. Look at Ben Affleck. Here's one for you.
Yeah, and Jennifer Lopez.
So what were they, like a couple, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
I don't know what it was.
They were.
So they didn't get married, right? They were
They were engaged.
Okay, so they break up. He goes and marries another chick and has kids. She marries the guy. She's married a couple guys,
Yep.
actually, right? She's had kids and done all that. Now they get back together. 20 years later, they're both. And here's the thing: both of their or all their past relationships are documented. It's not like they can hide. I'm sure there's some that aren't known, but most of them are. So they know this going into it. They get reconnected. They get married. And now I hear they're on the outs again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, what a mess, right? I mean, how in the world does that happen where they get back together, quote, fall in love again,
Yes.
or rekindle, or what term you want to use, and decide to go through and get married?
Well, that's kind of just like, I know someone whose parents both dated someone in high school and college. They broke up. The breakup was not good. They meet someone, get married, have their kids, and then when that marriage ended, they went back to those people. And
well, that's probably a rarity, I would
You
say.
think?
Yeah, I would say that. I think the one you asked about earlier, just a minute ago, 2 years go by, like a high school girlfriend, or you hear these. I mean, these country songs about those types of things.
yeah.
I think if you broke up and there was a 2-year span, and say the male person went and had 25 relationships, the female person went and had 150 relationships, they meet back up, none of that matters.
That's true.
Unless you got some, you're
So why
weird
does it
about
matter
that.
in like a week?
Well, I guess it comes back to, if you say, hey, we're broken up, and then you have to act out on do something in a short period of time to recognize that what you had was, you were stupid, you made a mistake. That's really when you have to make a decision on if that goes outside of what you would say are your non-negotiables.
Oh yeah. Why do you think, let's say I get drunk one time, and I wake up, I'm like, I'm never doing that again.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Which people do all the time.
Well, a few months go by, and I'm talking really sick.
No, I
like
gotcha.
if I'm like can't move for a day and a half, work is out
Crippled.
the window, everything. So let's say 3 or 4 months go by, and I'm like, I'm gonna rip it tonight. I'm gonna go out,
Yeah.
And I get drunk again, so sick, like sicker than I had been. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm like, all right, I'm never doing that again. Because at this point, I was so ill, I lost 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
So then 6 to 8 months go by, maybe a year, maybe it's longer this time. And I go out, and I'm maybe I had a bad day, and I'm like excited to see my one friend. I go out, we're at a comedy club, I'm ripping, we had dinner, whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm blacking out.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, that moment was my moment to stop and never go back to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you've probably had a moment where you got really drunk. And then
Never.
Now, yeah. Well, and now it's like it's been years and years and years since you've gotten blackout, thrown up type of drunk, because you've learned that like this is my limit, and like I'm going to enjoy it like this.
I'm smarter.
So I had to go through many things to recognize that the value of my body feeling good in work, it took a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So why did it take me a few times to get to that point?
Yep.
And
what
where
about the person who
sometimes-
never stops?
Or what about the person that does it once and is like, oh my gosh, I'm sober. I'm going sober. So
Yep.
So what's your thoughts on
Well,
that?
first of all, you're talking about a whole different area, because it's just your accountability, not someone else's. So I would really segregate the difference between,
like having to sleep with someone to notice
yeah,
someone's value.
I mean, now you're talking, there's another person that, I don't.
Yeah.
So I think when you talk about self-accountability to yourself, which you know very well, and having, again, keep using the word standards for yourself, that becomes, when are you going to learn? So I just told this story to somebody early in our drinking career, back when I was a young man. There was a guy who got a drunk driving right early, right? And the guy was devastated about it. I mean, he literally wouldn't even drink. We'd say, hey, dude, we'll drive you home. Don't worry about it. No, not drinking. So I'd say for years he didn't drink. And then when he finally did drink again, it was very little, and I've seen him since. This, again, many years ago. So other people I knew got so many drunk drivings, they got thrown in jail.
Yes.
And lost licenses and so
Paid
cars
fees.
and all kinds of, I'm talking, it screwed their life up.
Totally.
Literally. So why are some, Yes. So that to me is just like, why are some people that can't eat good food and discipline, exercise?
Because also remember too, sometimes just things that are only hurting yourself actually hurt you more than sometimes when you hurt someone else. So like,
That's right.
there have been times where, yes, my drinking is just my own accountability, but sometimes that has hurt way more than when I like hurt a friend's feelings.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because sometimes I was like,
Well, have you
that
ever been
friend-
disappointed with yourself?
so many times.
Right. So that's a conscience that is heightened, right? So in life, back to the two examples. The one guy gets one drunk driving. I mean, it like changed him to the better. The other guy got another one, got another one, got another one, lost his license, had to leave the state, couldn't drive, all these things. And it wasn't till like 20 years later that he went, I'm done, right? And so the level of pain that one person has to take, or a drama, or whatever you want to call it, legal in this case, for some people, they don't need to go through all that. Just like you see that in school. Why do some kids go out and party their like crazy in high school and crash a car and die, and other kids are really responsible? I mean, that's an individual thing. It's parenting. It's how their moral compass. It's a lot of things. So this now translates to, back to wrap up our topic of this podcast. Why do some people then do these things in a relationship? And
or right outside of it.
Now, what we didn't say was there are people who do this kind of stuff and they have no remorse at all. Doesn't even faze them. Like they think, what's the big deal? Who cares?
Yeah.
Whatever.
But I think at the end of the day, it's still on us to remember to forgive that's where they're meeting themselves. And I think another thing too, this is really quick too, I've noticed with other people's actions that hurt us, friends, or even sometimes family and a relationship, I've learned to not take it personal at all. And here's why. I think when someone has judged how I behave, that maybe sounds out of context. Maybe, listen, there's always a little bit of truth to something. I feel like if people are noticing that, like, hey, you're not very friendly, or you didn't say hi to this with me, probably very much was that. But that doesn't, I think if someone is saying, you didn't do this one thing, so therefore I believe you are this whole thing because of that behavior, to me, you cannot take that personal, because then that person, I think, is just projecting onto you. I think if someone steals from you, that's their issue. If someone cheats on you, I think that's their issue. Even because if someone didn't come to you, and I think even if someone communicated to you, hey, I need money from you, I see you doing well and I'm your best friend or your brother, you should give me money. And I'm like, no, I'm not giving you money, and you still steal from me. Or if my relationship's like, hey, I really needed some attention, you weren't giving me attention, so therefore I'm going to seek it outside of this relationship. No, those are still, you can't take it personal to yourself, because that was an action they decided to make within that scenario still. So that's on them. And that's when forgiveness came into me. And you can think of this differently, because we're going to all think differently. But this is where I've processed how to forgive, because that's where that person is currently. And if that person chose to steal from me, they clearly thought in that moment that was okay. Or even if they didn't, they still decided to make the decision. And I think, or what if they were like, I don't really care if she notices or not, because I need the money and she doesn't. Or if they were like, hey, I broke up with her because she was treating me a type of way. Now I'm free and I don't care about anything. I'm going to rip some drugs. That's still a them issue. And that's where, like, if they do come into your life or they try to apologize, you forgive them, because that's where they are currently. Do you agree with that, or what do you think?
Yes.
Do you take it personal ever? Like if someone does
well,
you wrong,
I
do you
think
take
it's
it personal?
easy to say I don't. I think there's always a little bit of I mean, we're emotional humans, and we tend to, we like to think we're tougher than we really are sometimes. I think it's easy to say that. I think that goes back to, we're talking about character here. If you really, we'll kind of close this up, but our character of us as each person that we have is something that you create and build over time, in terms of how you are with things. If you think about loyalty to a friend, a friend that you have, and they call you and you help them, not just with money, anything. Just, hey, I'm moving this weekend. You're there. Hey, I'm in this pickle with my school. Can you help? Yes. Hey, I got a question for you about my job. Should I do this? Yes. And that's reciprocal. You in turn do the same back to them. Hey, how do you feel about this situation? Okay. So those types of things, when you establish that with somebody, and hopefully one day it's going to be your future husband, wife, whatever where you're at with that character is something that is so strong in that person that regardless of anything that happens, that character will stand strong. That loyalty to you and you to them is greater than anything ever. And I've been fortunate to have that in many areas of my life, both in terms of significant others, children, friends, acquaintances, co-workers, and so on. And it's been refreshing. It's not a lot, by the way, but there's enough out there that I've really value that. But that also has to do with who I am and my character. So I would just say all this comes back to, what are you going to hold yourself accountable to? What is your character? And does that align to that other person? Because that's what they're showing you as their character. A person who goes out, and if we get into semantics, well, we were technically broke up. We're not broke up. We're this or that. And they do something, like you said, that is really more about how they are impacted by it. That's their character, not yours.
Totally.
Right? And so that you can judge because you see it. There it is. That's what they did. That's their character. Okay, now I see how they are. Now what am I going to do with that? That becomes the question mark. Do
you think someone's bad character can change to be good?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
So is that where a second chance comes in?
Well, I have this eternal hope in just in people in general, and I try to think this way, that all people are good, right? But it could be that they just haven't had enough people believe in them or get them to feel that way. But at some point, you can't be a victim for everything that happens to you. You have to be accountable to yourself. I always tell you that. And so if I'm blaming people or things or stuff for why I do bad things, I got news for you. It's not going to fly over time.
I think it's interesting too because, I think when I was given a few chances at the condo or whatever, I think about if I didn't get those chances, how hard life would have been and maybe how different my life would have been, because I was in college at the time. If I had to find a new place to live and stuff, how crazy that would have been. It makes me think, would I have been a better person if you didn't give me chances?
Well,
or was I...
If is a word that...
So that's what I'm saying. I
careful.
think too, if you're dealing with a relationship, a boyfriend, girlfriend, or a friendship, if you, see the fruits of their character and they're willing to show you that that isn't their real fruits or what they want to be doing, I think it just comes down to, maybe if you hadn't given someone a second chance ever and you're like, you know what, this will be my trial run to see if I can give people, because now you're at the point where you're like, no, where I know some scenarios you were in, you were like, we'll give it a shot,
Well, one just came to mind real quick. Boy, I trained a lot of people in business, right? And you've met some of those people over time.
Totally.
Without mentioning names. And I remember in one particular young man that I was fortunate enough to hire and help him move through his career. There were a lot of little things he was doing that were creating problems for him and me in terms of the customers and stuff. And I remember I'd pull him aside, or we'd sit down and talk, and I'd say, hey, listen, real bright person had intelligence, but he lacked emotional intelligence. So he had IQ but lacked EQ, which we've talked about a lot, right?
We have, yeah.
And so there is a big difference between someone who has they're bright in terms of an IQ, but they lack emotional intelligence. So I actually used to have this book I would give
Wow.
people who I felt that way. And I told this individual, I said, let me tell you something, man. You have some like incredible potential as a person. You have all this, I mean, you're bright. You're almost like scary smart. You're quick. You know, you had the look, everything going on. I said, but I tell you what, you run over people sometimes because you're not sensitive. You're not sensing their emotions and what's going on in their mind. You only are thinking about yourself, right? Which is a lack of EQ. Thinking of self versus thinking of everything else.
Interesting. Is a lack of EQ?
It's a part of it.
Thinking,
it's
okay.
part of it. So anyway, I had this nice discussion with him, and it forever changed him because he was smart enough, IQ, to read the book, ingest it, ask questions, and then apply it to himself. To this day, he's an extremely successful individual, like beyond what he ever could have imagined. And so I think sometimes that's what you look for when you're developing a child, you know, as a child's being raised, when you're in a relationship, this second chance idea, as you call it, is the person developing in a way, right, their EQ to understand, and in examples we've talked about, do they know that that behavior is bad for them first, let alone bad for someone else? And when they get to that point and they understand that, then they're not going to repeat that behavior. Like you said, the drinking thing was because you didn't like the result of that behavior. So the person who's performing other bad behaviors needs to also do that. Okay?
That was a great ending point. Okay.
So I think this idea of EQ will end here. We could do a podcast just
That's
on
a
that.
good one. That's a good ending piece because
Yeah.
I needed to hear that.
That's right.
Because I've recently dealt with somebody who realized that their actions were not good for them.
That's good.
Ultimately.
Well, it starts there.
Okay, that's interesting.
Well, because how can they get your right? You know, you said about when I use the word remorse. Remorse comes from the idea that identify that this behavior is again, like when you say the condo and having the party, you were probably thinking, wait a second. I'm not trying to put words in your head or thoughts, but man, my dad has really stood up for me. My dad has gone the extra mile for me. My dad's got my back. Why would I stab the person who's really been there for me when he's the guy that's in my corner?
That's true.
And you did in your letter, as I remember, was around those thought process, which told me you were getting it. See, I could glean from what you said in the letter and that you wrote out, and you could tell you poured out your thoughts and emotions that, okay, this kid gets it, right? And I didn't think, oh, you'll never screw up again. I just knew that you understand what was in front of you and what you were in danger of losing. I didn't have to threaten it. I didn't have to say, I'll never talk to you again. You just knew that I was going to hold you accountable, which you didn't like. And this is another thing. People don't like to be held accountable. They don't.
Yeah.
Nobody does. We all just want to be, this was the alcohol. You know, there was a spaceship that landed and a bunch of Martians jumped out and took me. But anyway, we can do part 2 on this.
This is a great conversation. I will say, to close this out, when you're thinking about forgiveness, think about that it's releasing yourself from the pain of what that person did to you. Even if it's like so unforgivable, it's not unforgivable. You can forgive, but it might be something where you don't allow back into your life because you just had boundaries and standards set for yourself. So set the standard. You guys can find us on all platforms.
Give us your feedback on this one.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we hope you guys like this episode.
Spotify,
I really love this one.
Apple, we're there.
Sabrina, you're going to kill it.
Thumbs up. We need you. Let's go.
Sabrina.
Peace out.
Bye.